Okay, in this video, I'm going to demonstrate the prototype of what I call the Writing Instruction Feedback Assistant, which is a GPT designed specifically to provide feedback to freshman level composition class students. The environment I used was what is called GPT Builder, which is a feature of ChatGPT, and this is kind of the steps that I followed, creating the builder, training it, configuring it, basically tweaking it, and then eventually going live or publishing it. So I'm going to go ahead and walk through that process that I followed in putting together this training model. This is unscripted, so I'm just kind of doing it as I go along. This is the ChatGPT interface, and the ChatGPT builder is over here. And I've already created mine. As you can see, there are other people who have created their own custom versions of ChatGPT. Mine is over here, and I call it the Writing Instruction Feedback Assistant. And let's go ahead and go into the developmental environment. Developmental environment is pretty simple. It's, 2 panes. Left-hand pane is where you work with it. Right-hand pane is the end result. What I did was let me go into this here. I kind of followed a sequence for training the new GPT. First of all, I put in the training data set. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. I put in the initial parameters. And then after I put in those initial parameters, I started testing it with student papers and iterated through several iterations. And as I was doing that, I was tweaking the model, basically adjusting the way it was performing, modifying some things that it was either doing well or things that I thought needed to be modified a bit. So let's go back to the environment. You can see here, this is where I put in the initial instructions. Pretty simple. Make sure you don't reveal names. I want you to address it, address the student in the second person, in somewhat of a conversational manner. Don't provide verbatim suggestions for improvement. Rather prompt the student to provide their own answers. And so that was my initial, those were my initial instructions. Fairly simple. And then what I did was I inputted papers and comments on the papers that I had made. These were from my students last semester. I was able to input only 9 of them. That's a limitation of the developmental environment. So that's what I was kind of stuck with. Ideally, I would like to provide a lot more of a training data set for the model, but it seemed to have worked pretty well with the limited data set that I provided. Okay, so once I had those preliminaries done, I started working with the data set, or with the training model. And over here on the right-hand side is what the interface that the student sees. Fairly minimalist. It says upload your draft at the plus sign below and then push the up arrow to begin. Fairly simple. So let's go ahead and work with the model itself. And this is the process I went through after I did that preliminary and set up the model. then I went ahead and fed it a student paper. So let's see what we go. Okay, so there it is. It's been updated, and there's a link to it, so I can provide the student with a link where they can just put it in their browser, and it brings them up to this page. Let me go ahead and get rid of this sidebar over here. And this is what the student sees. So let's go ahead and work with it and see what it does. I'm going to go ahead and input a student paper. Here's one right here. As I recall, this is not a very good paper. So let's go ahead and input that one and see what the model does with it. Okay, so you input it and then push the up arrow and it starts. And this is what the model does. And again, I've been tweaking it. When I first ran it, basically what it did was it provided a data dump of, here's my critique or my assessment of your entire paper. Well, that was a little bit overwhelming, so I've tweaked it so that it starts with the introduction and the thesis, which in my mind is where it ought to start, because that's the foundation of the essay. And unless the student has that foundation laid, there's no point in going on and working with the rest of the paper. So let's see what the model says about this student's paper. Thank you for sharing your essay, etc., etc., and it provides some feedback. It says, opening lines, they rely heavily on generalities and passive framing, and it says, the thesis, right now your thesis seems to be, which tells me that the student did not do a very good job of explicitly articulating their thesis. So the model is kind of guessing what it is the student's thesis is. And it says, here's what I think it is. But it says this is more of an announcement than an argumentative. You don't take a position. So let's turn this into a clear, unifying theme that captures your analytic stance, etc. Okay, so revised intro framework. So here, this is one of the things I like about what the model is doing, because initially it would have, when I first started working with it, it would have just said, okay, you need to say this instead of what you said. It's gotten a lot better with tweaking. Now it's saying, okay, let's work with what you got, but I want you to tell me what you want to say in this paper. How would you complete this with your own words? For example, what do you see as the most important consequences in nuclear tests? The topic here is nuclear testing in the Marshall Islands after World War II, and the environmental impacts and the impacts on the native population. Okay, so that kind of lays the background. So how would you complete this in your own wording? What do you see as the most important consequence? So the model is actually leading the student to the conclusion or a good result. Once you refine your thesis, we can move on to restructuring, etc. So these tests led to, so the student would say, okay, what is it that I want to say? So I'm going to play student here. I'm going to say that these tests led to serious environmental damage, which lasted a long time. Nice thing about this is that the model is very forgiving of misspellings and all that kind of stuff. It seems to be a pretty good job of interpreting what it is that the student is saying. Okay, so let's let to that as illustrated by So the student has read the essay that this is based on, so the student knows that the point of the essay was there was a lot of cancer and birth defects. Drawing from Darlene Kaju Johnson's first-hand account, this essay argues that, now the student might have to think about that a little bit, but it argues that, let's go ahead and just say here's what the student says. The testing was done without a lot of regard for the local population, which is kind of the point of Darlene Kaju Johnson's essay, that the Army came in, did these tests, didn't really much care what the impact was on the populace. So let's see what the model does with this. Great, strong thematic themes. Let's shape them in more focused analytic. Okay, try completing the revised framework with your own voice. Okay, and it gives a, okay, it's worked in what the student said into an introduction and a thesis. How does this sound to you? If you like, you can modify the wording, make it more in line with your style once you're happy. Let's try something. The student says, this sounds too fancy. It doesn't sound like me. And knowing this student, I think this is probably a conclusion the student might come to, because the student does not write like that. So let's see what the model does with that. Good instinct. Should sound like you, not somebody else. So simplified language, keep strong argument. Okay. U.S. chose remote Pacific Islands, said it was for science, world peace. Test caused major environmental damage, serious problems, cancer and birth defects. Okay, argues U.S. did these tests without much concern for the people who lived there, and the damage still felt today. Okay, that's not bad. That's not a bad introductory paragraph. And it's done in the student's words, because the student, filled in those blanks and the model picked up on it. Does this sound more like your voice? And once you're comfortable, we could look at the body paragraphs, make sure they support new introduction. Now, I'm going to put something in here. One of the things that Darlene Kaju Johnson wrote about was what she called jellyfish babies. And it's kind of a term that would stick in the student's mind. And what it was babies that were born without limbs and things like that. So, again, playing student, I'm going to say, well, what about the jellyfish babies? Powerful, adds vivid emotional impact, shows the human cost directly. Let's revive the thesis again to include that specific detail without making it too fancy. Okay, and so let's see. Birth defects so extreme that some babies were called jellyfish babies. Again, plain student. Explain what a jellyfish baby is. Good move. Short explanation. Make your thesis clearer. Okay? So born without limbs, eyes, or bones, so the islanders called them jellyfish babies. Okay. Keeps your voice, adds clarity. Feel free to adjust any part of it. Here the student, may make some tweaks to it. Let's just do something here. So how does this new introduction compare with what I wrote originally? I'm not sure the student would ask this question, but okay, so the model comparison. Your original. Here's what it is. Your revised. And what's improved. And this is the part I like. It just doesn't show the before and after, but it also shows the student what the changes that the student made by filling in those blanks, what those changes resulted in. Clearly states what happened. Instead of saying we'll discuss, you now make a claim about injustice and long-term harm. Good. Strong thesis. Engagement, jellyfish babies, vivid image, captures the reader. No repetition, avoids phrasing like discussing, apply to my paper. Would you like to revise the verse, body, paragraph, exclamation tone, and clarity of this new introduction? I'm going to do one more thing here. My professor says that transitions are important. See what the... Absolutely right. Transitions are crucial. Guide your reader through your argument smoothly, showing how your ideas connect. Let's look how you move from your introduction to the first body paragraph. Here's the current beginning of your first body paragraph. Sentence doesn't clearly connect to your thesis or preview what the paragraph's about. Let's add a smoother and more purposeful transition. Try using this. I have a little bit of problem with the model here because instead of leading the student to come up with a better transition or topic sentence, it presents the student with one. The model needs some more tweaking, but it explains. This does three things. Refers back to the thesis, which is what a transition sentence should do, previews what's going to be in the paragraph, sets the emotional tone for the evidence that follows. Kind of like what this model is doing. It's not only helping the student reword what the student originally wrote, but it's also providing some explanation for why it's doing what it's doing. So, given the fact that I've only been working with this model for a couple days, I've only gone through 3 or 4 or 5 different iterations with different test papers, I'm pretty impressed with where it's going. Like I say, it started out by basically rewriting the student's essay. I think it's gotten a lot better in guiding the student through the process of revising the essay. So anyway, that's my prototype. I think I'm going to keep working on this because I think this has got some possibilities, some real possibilities for me to use this in my own praxis. The way I would see using this is I would have the students do a first draft. And then I would say, okay, now I want you to submit it to this particular model and work through it. And then I want you to come up with a good second draft. That's something that I don't have the time to do. I don't have the time to go through multiple drafts with the students. This tool has the time to do it. And so I think I'm going to keep working on this. I think this is more than just a class project. I think it's something that I might end up actually developing for use in my own classroom. So that's it.